How Sean Strickland can beat and maybe even finish Khamzat Chimaev. With Khamzat having a relatively impressive victory over Kamaru Usman, it seems inevitable that he's going to get the next title shot against Strickland. And going into this matchup, most people see Khamzat as a very heavy favorite over Strickland. But I'm here to tell you, I think not only can Strickland beat Khamzat, but I think he can finish him. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionated MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. I think it's no surprise that ever since Khamzat made it to the UFC, he's been extremely impressive. At this point, we all know that crazy stat where early on in Khamzat's career against his first 3 or 4 opponents, he basically didn't take a punch, he was able to just ragdoll everybody and get finishes quickly that way, or he was able to just finish them on the feet like he was able to do in that Gerald Meerschaert fight. But after having all those impressive victories by basically not taking any damage whatsoever and finishing everybody the UFC put in front of him right away, he was given his first real test against Gilbert Burns. And although that fight ended up being relatively competitive, at the end of the day, I thought Khamzat did very well out there. He was able to be very successful against a legitimate threat at the welterweight division in Gilbert Burns without even utilizing his best ability in wrestling, as that fight was basically a striking fight for the entirety of that matchup. And Khamzat was able to do a really nice job at establishing his jab, switching stances very fluidly as well, and just did a really nice job at showing his versatility to his game. Now after that Gilbert Burns matchup, he went up against Kevin Holland, who he absolutely went through, taking him down relatively early on in the first round and submitting him via Darce choke. And after that, his next matchup was going to be up against Kamaru Usman after Paulo Costa had to drop out. And going into this Usman matchup, most people thought Khamzat would be able to run through this guy just due to the fact that he was able to do that to basically everybody else, but also when you consider the fact that people think Kamaru is a little bit over the hill, at least going into that matchup, and he took the fight on 10 or 11 days notice across the world, it was going to be very difficult for Usman to win. And in that first round of that fight between these two, Khamzat did dominate, as he got a clear 10-8 round, taking Usman down to the ground and basically controlling him the entirety of that round. But after that first round, things started to get a little bit shaky for Khamzat, as it appeared as if Khamzat was starting to slow down starting in that second round. As in that second round, Usman was able to do a really nice job at establishing his own jab, switching stances at times as well, and throwing that right straight and hitting Khamzat with big shots, and it just seemed like Khamzat overall was slowing down significantly from where he was in that first. Now it did come out after the fight that Khamzat probably ended up breaking his wrist or breaking his hand, but regardless of that fact, I do think overall when you just watched him out there, he did look a little bit gassed. Now I made a couple videos in the past talking about Khamzat Chimaev and how most people thought his biggest weakness was his gas tank, mainly due to his Gilbert Burns matchup where he did look like he was a little bit gassed in that fight, but at the time I did mention I didn't necessarily completely buy into that, just due to the fact that that fight with Gilbert and Khamzat was fought at an extremely high pace. Both of them were extremely tired, and even in that third round I thought that Khamzat was a fresher fighter out there. But with all that being said, after watching his fight with Kamaru Usman, I'm starting to buy into that a little bit more, as it's pretty clear that Khamzat's main goal in that first round is to be extremely dangerous. He's going to go all out for a takedown, he's going to go all out to try to get a finish, but if he's not able to get a finish in that first round, it's going to be very difficult for him to keep up that pace and really keep up his cardio for the entirety of a fight. And I think we saw that explicitly in that matchup against Kamaru Usman. And as I said before, regardless of if Khamzat did or did not break his hand or wrist, I think either way it was pretty clear that he did look a little bit gassed. So at this point I definitely do think it is a little bit of a concern for him going forward, because obviously as I mentioned before, his next matchup is going to be for the title, which is obviously going to be a 5-round fight, and he's probably going to fight in a lot of 5-rounders throughout the rest of his career. So this is definitely going to be something that Khamzat needs to address. And even more specifically for the Sean Strickland matchup, this is also going to play a ginormous factor in my opinion. Because when you look at Sean Strickland's game, he does a lot of different things well out there. Like for example, he has very good stand-up abilities. Although they are very unorthodox, he is able to be very successful with them by establishing the jab, letting his right hand go, go at times, throwing some nice uppercuts or hooks. And to really illustrate how good Sean Strickland has gotten over the years with that unique style, just look at his last fight against Izzy, where not only was Sean able to compete with Izzy, who's seen as one of, if not the best strikers in the UFC, but he's able to dominate him for a full 5 rounds, and he even dropped him. Now, besides his striking ability, Sean also actually has really good wrestling. Although he doesn't necessarily utilize that against virtually anybody, he never offensively wrestles. At the end of the day, he still does have good wrestling, and in this matchup against Khamzat, that's going to be very important. Now, besides that, probably the best thing about Sean, and a huge factor for why I think he can beat Khamzat and maybe even potentially finish him, is due to his cardio. Strickland has fought in a bunch of 5-round fights over the years, and he does a better job probably than anybody else at utilizing his energy properly. When you look at all of Sean Strickland's 5-round fights, or really any of his fights in general, early on he does a nice job at establishing the jab but not utilizing too much energy, and as the fight does progress, he just constantly keeps that pace and keeps himself fresh. Now, in certain moments, if his opponent is gassed or hurt, Sean will turn it up. We've seen that a couple times in his previous fights, but overall, just keeping himself fresh out there gives him a huge advantage over basically everybody he fights, but especially in this Khamzat fight, I think it's going to be a real factor. But now, let's look at the specific matchup and get into my breakdown and give a reasoning for why I think Sean Strickland has a real chance to not only win, but has a chance to even finish Khamzat. So I think this fight is going to come down to the first 2 rounds. If Khamzat's able to take the fight to the ground and dominate, I think he's going to win via finish. But if Sean's able to survive the first 2 rounds, I think he's actually going to be the favorite going forward from there. Because if Khamzat's able to dominate in those first 2 rounds, but he's not able to get the finish, he's going to get extremely tired. And once that 3rd round starts and going forward from there, he's only going to get more and more tired. And as he does gas more and more, it's going to be a lot easier to stuff a lot of those shots that he does throw. And if Sean's able to keep the fight on the feet, at least in the later rounds of that fight, I think he's going to be able to dominate Khamzat Chimaev, to be honest. Because even though Khamzat is actually a pretty good striker out there, he's fast, he has a lot of power, he has ability to switch stances and throw different looks at you, at the end of the day, I just think Sean Strickland is so much of a better striker than a lot of guys, but definitely including Khamzat Chimaev, as Strickland does a great job at being extremely defensively sound. To be honest, I don't know if we've seen a better defensive striker out there than Sean Strickland, but even besides that, he does a great job at utilizing that jab, while also after establishing that jab, he does a nice job at unloading a little bit, and I could see him in that 4th or 5th round start to unload on Khamzat and potentially even finish him. So overall, I do think this fight can go either way, but in either direction that it does go, I think it's going to be relatively dominant, if that makes sense. If it ends early on, it's going to be a dominant finish for Khamzat Chimaev, but if it goes to the later stages, and especially if it goes to a decision, I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Sean's able to win very decisively. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening in this matchup, but I will say I am extremely excited to see what does. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Sean Strickland can legitimately beat Khamzat Chimaev, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.